3PNR with Adam R. Welcome to 3PNR. I'm your host, Adam R. And joining me again tonight, I have Earl Gray Anderson. Earl, how you doing, sir?
Hey, I'm doing great, Adam. How are you doing?
Doing well. How was your summer?
Wow. It was busy but productive and magical, actually. It was very, very good. Lots of stuff going on this summer.
Yeah, I took a little time off. I took about a month, maybe a month and a half off from the podcast. Shoot pool and actually go outside and not think about, because how I am. I think. I go really deep into thought on stuff. And
it was a thinking man's game,
It is. You go from thinking about the mysteries to patterns, right?
Yeah, it's all geometry and it's foot pounds and directional force and vector, and it's kind of a scientific game, but it's relaxing, which is and when your ball hits, makes contact and things start falling into the pockets, it's just such a satisfying feeling.
Yeah, the science behind it too, especially, and there's a social aspect. A lot of the friends you haven't seen in a long time. I mean, it's a good thing to get out, be recreational, and break the norm. And so I'm going to continue to do it. Before I took the break, I'd spoken to your new U.S. Director of Investigations, Steve Hudgens.
Steve, great.
That guy's right to the point, man. No,
he's old military.
You can tell it's there. I mean, he's right there. Like, he wants to know the facts, and I like him. You know what I mean? I miss Doug Wilson. No doubt.
Doug was a wonder and such a magical guy, and somehow or another, I mean, he was juggling all of these plates and pins. It was like,
yeah.
And he's an amazing guy, and I'm certainly going to miss him. But Steve is he's been with MUFON for so long, and the guy, there was that one case that he investigated that was just so crazy, the Crawford, Texas flying Walmart case, that was right near, President Bush's Texas White House back at the time.
Right.
And this thing was the size of a Walmart. And I mean, there was a radar signature on it and everything. And it was very, very strange. And they did scramble planes out. And that was Steve's baby. And the guy is like an old school ufologist, but he's very, very open to, he exposes himself to all of the thoughts and ideas that ufology sort of incur. And I think that he's a great, director of investigations for MUFON. I really like Steve. So
I do too. He's got that, can I take this to court attitude? I admire that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And that case you're speaking about, in public record, you could see there was military response to that. I mean, that's not a tucked away thing that's a known thing. There was it was very close to the Bush camp compound. In fact, I do remember a long time ago there being maybe a special on History Channel regarding that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember that. That was where I first heard about it, I think.
Yeah.
It was before I think it was a little bit before I began working as a field investigator for MUFON. I was still like the couch bound ufologist, which is what it is, but you got to get your hands dirty if you want to learn stuff. That's where I first think it came to my awareness was from one of those ubiquitous TV shows that are out there. But Steve's great, amazing ufologist that I have a lot of respect for, and I'm glad I'm working with him and under him, and go Steve.
I'm gonna have him on pretty. We were discussing probably every few months to kind of get a brief update on where he's going, the direction of MUFON, because MUFON's an incredible organization, and people don't give it a lot of credit. And I say this a lot: the U.S. government and the military itself. When it comes to ufology, their reasoning for not having more of a program directed to, or at least one that we know publicly, with larger resources, is because they feel that it's a waste of time, right? Meanwhile, they have an organization with the vastness and the size of MUFON. Why not give MUFON some resources, some money?
Mm-hmm.
They got it's listen, MUFON's you guys are very professional.
Connected with we don't want to be connected or funded by the Pentagon, right? I mean, that's the one thing I think is important, is that we want to keep MUFON a private, in the private sector.
Sure.
But hey, if they want to kick some funding in for us, that would be great. Any funding is good for MUFON, because it's going to go to research for this.
Right. At least in the form of grants. In the form of grants would be helpful. Mm-hmm. This way, it kind of shifts the burden off of the government a little bit to say, well, we're looking into this, but we're not putting full into this because we have this war going on. We have hunger stuff going on. I get all that. And if you want to divert, so be it. But at least push some grants in the direction of a well-trained, to become part of MUFON. People don't understand is there's a training and there's a vetting. You just don't get to walk into MUFON, hey, I want to be a member, and that's it. There's a vetting, there's a training. There's a lot to it. It's very intricate, and so. And if you were to give them resources in the form of grants, it would and have like a reporting system, which I'm sure the government, everything you do and any other researcher does, I'm sure they have their way of finding out, right? They have to.
Yes. That's something that I think that we're all aware of. If the government wants something, they're going to get it,
Exactly.
I mean, they have their ways and means. And so for them, I don't think there's any secrets really, but I find it interesting that in the recent congressional hearings, MUFON, our nonprofit organization that took over for Project Blue Book when they closed doors, doing the Air Force's job for over 50 years now, that we were mentioned in the first 45 seconds, I think, of those congressional hearings. And that says a lot about, MUFON and our provenance out there. And it says a lot for this organization that we train people, we mentor them. And it's a big tent, you have people from all ranges of society in MUFON, but our creed, of course, is the scientific investigation of UFOs for the benefit of humanity. And we kind of stick to that creed, and I'm glad. It's a good one.
Indeed. Here's a fun fact. There's no protocol for local jurisdiction law enforcement in the event of, let's say, hypothetically speaking, a UFO did crash somewhere. There's no protocol for law enforcement at all. It raises up to the government level, NSA, et cetera. And, that's kind of spreading them thin. At said point, that's where the burden falls upon MUFON. You have people, that's why you have state directors, state investigators, and plenty of members. So you could be there on site in real time.
I right now, I have 2 STAR team members, and we're the ones that will go out to a crash site, or if there's a UFO that leaves a physical deposit of some kind that is evidence, we know how to deal with that. But right now it's myself and my assistant state director, Linda Fletchner. We're both STAR team level, and but I'm planning on training others in my group to take on the helm of STAR team as well, because I think that we're to the point where the idea of a UFO crash or finding exotic materials is not out of the question now. There's a lot of close encounters happening, so many sightings, and I think that's around the bend here, and it could happen. I might have to get off of this show in a second if I get a call to go out to a site. So. Right.
It's funny too, because a large sum of people still think UFOs are nonsense, like not real, and it's taking the fact the U.S. government and their release of their videos, the pilots and the amount of military personnel that have bear witness. I mean, it's not, look, UFOs exist. It's a real thing. The question is, and what's controlling them? What's at and so you could leave that for debate all day. That's fine. But you can't deny UFOs. You can't, it's impossible. It's crazy to say they're not real. It's even crazier to say they might be Russian or Chinese. Both those groups, the Russians and Chinese, if they had that technology, do you think they'd hide it? Not at all. It would be in our face, like instantly in our face, because that would be like, well, what are you going to do about it? That's that type of technology. So it's disturbing to hear people don't even believe anymore. Some people, not all. And I think the percentage of people believing in this phenomenon now is growing larger due to, these congressional hearings and these proceedings. Although, admittedly, when you saw that congressional hearing, that was a pretty, for something that and Earl, did you notice they said this a lot? National security threat. Those words kept being thrown around in that. And that being said, that was a pretty empty room. I didn't see a lot of 3-letter acronyms available there for speech. So it kind of lets you know the level of severity they take this to. So I don't know. And then it's for the STAR team. That's why I think there should be more resources given to MUFON, because again, it shifts the burden from government, allows people that focus on this subject matter to go out there and do the investigations and then report to the government what it is they find, like Steve would say, can I take this to court? That kind of material, right?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, MUFON, you have to keep the wheels on the bus. That's just, that's just true. And I agree. We do great research. And we have a pre-organized team that's been mentored and vetted and knows what they're doing, and it's worldwide. So if you have the group already in place and it's, you have them trained and they know what to look for, they know what not to look for, why not utilize that? So certainly MUFON isn't going to turn away, grants and such, and that's a good thing. I mean, there was one UFO that the Air Force put out. I think that they really thought it was a UFO, and they were questioning it. It was, well, I saw this. It was this sort of silver semi-triangular shield-shaped thing that this pilot got a photo of, and it was a Batman balloon. And as soon as I saw it, I'd seen that balloon before because other people had reported the same thing, except usually it wasn't that high up to where, an Air Force pilot would see it. But, the air currents can get pretty wild and stuff goes up. It's a big helium balloon. But I immediately put that out, and I wonder how much the Air Force spent, looking into that. Balloon that you could buy on, you could buy it on the internet very cheaply, under $10, I think. If you want to fill it with helium, it might be a little more.
Meanwhile, MUFON has encountered this countless times, and they just had like a bit of an open link of communication. Perhaps that could have been figured out long ago, right?
Yeah. Well, you have to remember, it's like, like Hynek said way back in the day that 90 to 95% of UFO reports that come in are prosaic objects, the moon, planets. And now, of course, we have drones and we have all manner of things. The readout screen, advertisement screen on blimps, sometimes if the blimp is far enough away, all you'll see is this strange light in the sky that is changing and moving along. And then we have Elon Musk.
Yeah.
his repetitive onslaught of launches of his satellite train that he's been putting up. And lots of people, from here to Europe, I had some friends that were outdoors in England the other night, and they're looking up and they see these dots that are going in a line that are appearing out of nowhere. And they just happened to be in the right place at the right time to see Elon Musk's Dragon rocket release the Starlink satellite train that he was sending up. And I was able to give him the stats and say, yeah, this was shot off from Vandenberg a little while ago, and you should be seeing it right about now. That's what you saw, and it was just like, well, thank you, Earl. Yeah. But there's so many IFOs out there, and I wonder how much the 3-letter acronyms, the officialdom guys have spent, wasting their time on stuff that we've already, seen a million times.
Right.
When a real UFO report comes in, you kind of recognize it. There are markers we look for, and it's not just your random light in the sky. And Lord knows, we get lots of random light in the sky cases, and Sometimes, I mean, I'll tell my field investigators sometimes, this could be a UFO, it could be a drone, it could be, it could be a distant helicopter. If it is a UFO, it's a boring one.
Yeah.
you got to go, put your Sherlock Holmes hat on and don't call everything a UFO just because it's a light in the sky. Now if it shoots up out of the atmosphere, that's a different story. That's a UFO, whether theirs or ours. As far as the public knows, we can't have something that's hovering there and then suddenly shoots off into low Earth orbit. So that's an interesting light in the sky case.
It's a good point too, because Elon and many other, the billionaires are playing rockets now. And that's why I think they're speeding up the process of, I guess, making us aware of it, right? Because, again, the billionaires are going to go up, they're going to see
stuff up there.
Yeah. Eventually, I'm reading more and more reports about our Apollo missions and some of the things that, it's alleged because I haven't heard the recordings themselves. I read the supposed transcripts, but a lot of these guys from Apollo missions and Saturn missions were reporting objects and seeing things. And so I'm going to start looking into that a little bit. I don't know where to begin, because where am I going to get the clearance to go to a former NASA guy? But look, man, let me get the insight. And is the willingness for them to tell me? I don't know. Maybe current astronauts, and even then, like you said, they belong to a government, group. It's tough. It's going to be hard for me to go into that. But
they've all signed NDAs. That's the thing. My mom could only tell me so much, and she worked with the Redstone program and stuff.
Right.
But they signed stuff, so they have to be careful. But many of these guys, like Edgar Mitchell and even Buzz Aldrin, still, he'll almost disclose sometimes, and you see the little gleam in his eye, and he pulls it back.
Yeah.
But these guys knew, but they signed non-disclosure agreements. Unfortunately, they could be sent to prison if they broke them. So they have to be careful.
Right. I'd spoken to a Christian scientist recently, and I'm trying to get him on the podcast. And it was a really kind of strange conversation to begin with, because he was more or less, I challenge religion a lot, and I'm not discrediting religion. I just, for me to subscribe to something, I need better evidence than what they're putting out there. Right. So
sure.
It's and so what started the argument between him and I, and why I want to get him on the podcast and openly speak about it, is he asked me, well, what evidence have you come across since you've been, researching the proof of UFOs? I'm like, well, what evidence do you have of God, champ? And so, because outside of written verbiage that's probably been altered for thousands of years, what tangible, or as Steve would say, can I take this to court? Right. So it's the same thing. So anyhow,
well, it's a personal thing to people, and some of it's to do with upbringing. We tend to keep praying to the God that we were introduced to as children. I've noticed. I still kind of direct my prayers to Jesus, but I've certainly grown beyond the stuff that I was taught.
Right.
I believe that life is out there and is the prevalent thing in the universe. It's just people that have religion. I don't know. People cling to their life rafts in this world, I guess. You see it in politics. You see it in religion. You see it in sex. The three things you're not supposed to talk about in polite company.
Yeah, it's really weird, right? Religion's very, very interested in what we're doing with ourselves when naked. Yeah. It's kind of strange.
But people get past their dogma and then they find a kernel of spirituality. And I think that's the important thing. And, I know that since I've been throwing myself at this phenomenon, seeing some of the amazing things that I've seen and learned, and people I've met, that it hasn't hurt my belief in God at all. But I've certainly the concept of God has changed for me. It's not the kindly old man or the angry old man in the sky waving a stick. That's Thor, right? Nothing against Thor, but
I've had this conversation with countless people, Earl. You could belief is a strange thing, and not that it's strange.
Yes. And ufology isn't belief. That's,
right.
It's like that poster in the X-Files. I kind of detest it.
Same here.
I want to believe.
Right.
Like, what is that? What syrupy, wishy-washy crap? I mean, they had Dave Duchovny on, I guess it was Steve Colbert the other night, I think it was, or maybe it was Bill Maher, I forget. He gave this wishy-washy talk about, he was saying, well, I mean, everybody knows that abductees, they get probed and then they have dental work done.
Oh, man.
And I'm like, look at this guy going, what? Where did you get your information from? Dental work. Like you go to the dentist, they're going to fill in your cavities, right?
I mean,
and I've never had a probing case in all the years that I've been doing this. I have one where they feel like they were probed by something invisible, but it was their whole body that was probed.
I'm glad you said that, because so far, and I do a lot of off podcast interviews, because a lot of people, they don't have like hour-long stories or cases. They just had their isolated incident. And I've never, out of all the people spoken to that are an experiencer, I've never once heard the word probe. I've heard, mind manipulation or the way they perceive things is manipulated. The procedures they did there have, like you just said, seem relevantly invasive, right? Mm-hmm. Like when I say relevantly invasive, I mean like something I don't think it's a probe or a surgery. And if they're putting something in their bodies, and every one of them that tell me the same thing, it's something so minuscule, it's almost unnoticeable unless you really pay close attention to it. So yeah, I don't hear that probe thing often. In fact, I did tell you once upon a time, I did some research during the beginning of the podcast, and it would appear that abductions are reducing by numbers since probably 2006. And the only thing I could attribute to that is that every home has, I know right now in the room I'm in, there's several, there's a camera, there's an Alexa, there's a Google. It's all listening to me. If I speak to it right now, it's going to talk to me. To monitor us now, it's easy. Anyone could do it.
You're never going to get an abduction on film. It ain't going to happen.
No, especially with sophisticated technology.
I can tell you why. I mean, I'll explain why it won't happen. I mean, as you know, I've had an experience, and I remember mine. I didn't have to be hypnotically regressed. I mean, it changed the way that I looked at life. It changed the way that I looked at this phenomena. It was real. I don't want to believe. I have to. I know. It's too late to believe it happened. I was not probed. I did have DNA taken from me in the form of blood, I believe. Energy was taken from me. I wasn't spoken to or contacted with telepathically during the process. It was the little gray guys. For years, I wouldn't talk about it because I didn't want people to think I was crazy. But after doing this long enough and talking to doctors and politicians and lawyers and people that we, look up to, psychologists and that have gone through the same thing, it's a real phenomenon. I don't understand it. I don't think that it's necessarily malevolent, although I think that there's malevolent beings out there that do this, that misuse it, that are more or less DNA thieves and carpetbagger types.
Right.
But I don't know that abductions are slowing down so much as I think that back when it first began, it was shocking and it really got our attention when we heard about the stories. But I think that they were fewer. What I see with people have more visitations now than abductions, where they're visited and knowledge is given to them, where they'll get downloads, sometimes mathematical knowledge, sometimes kind of obtuse science ideas that are given to them. And sometimes they'll forget stuff and they'll be left with the message of this will return when it's needed. I heard that from a police officer a couple of years ago, for God's sakes, who was he was taken from his cruiser and not for DNA or anything, but to give him understanding of he thought that it was probably 0 point energy stuff. And this was a D student in math, by the way. And after a month of these nightly teaching incidents, is the best way I can put it, he was suddenly he was amazed. He had this understanding of just strange, obscure mathematics that he didn't have before. So we see more of that. We see more downloads. We see more teachable moments and less DNA farming. That's what I see. And that's just, I am an executive committee member of the, MUFON's ERT, the Experiencer Resource Team. And we that's all we do is talk with experiencers.
Yeah. Another thing too, Earl, and people don't realize this, for like, well, why are the stories with these experiencers inconsistent? Well, I'll tell you why. We all have the same hardware. The brain's the same as we see it in images, overall anyway, like computers when you buy them in mass production. But everyone's software is different. So you, me, and other people have different abilities to download, which is why I think some people are psychic. They could utilize part of their computer that others can't. And so if a sophisticated group of beings find someone like, well, this guy's software is different, he could be mathematical, or this person's software is different, we could utilize them for a DNA program. I mean, here's the thing. If you and I, Earl, and I said this a lot, we got our ship and we're traveling the vastness in the universe, however we do it, we find a planet and it's got its atmosphere. There's biological life. It's intelligent. We can't breathe their air ourselves. We're not acclimated. So a hybrid program would take not a lifetime, but eons. It's not an easy thing to do. Is it to alter the DNA of something? It takes a lot of time. Yeah. And then top it off, you want to observe. You don't want to change the way that things are down there. It's the natural order of things, so like how we are in nature. It's not our job to go down there and, all right, listen, here's this thing, we call it Christianity, and we can't do that. So, leads me back to, and that's why with the Christian Scientist, the first one I've spoken to, the arguments were, you can't discredit these people because your belief system, and his thing to me is, well, you have to have faith blindly. I'm like, buddy, blind faith flies into buildings all the time. I don't want to hear about blind faith. That's dangerous business. You should ask questions. You should always ask questions,
I always got in trouble with the theologians because of that, I wonder why. And I still do,
Blind faith starts, look at the wars in Ireland. Blind faith had two people who believe in the same Christ, but the different factions throwing rockets at each other. That's blind faith,
Yeah. So it's humanity's, Achilles heel. I mean, it seems like, I was, my wife gets these movie screeners, she works at Warner Brothers, and so they get sometimes the original screeners of things. And so I was watching 2001: A Space Odyssey. I have the Blu-ray, but this looks 10 times better than the Blu-ray. I don't know how they did it, but anyhow, but you look at that film, and as soon as intelligence starts coming upon these hominids, the ape men at the beginning of the film, what's the first thing that they invent when they suddenly become more intelligent? They invent the first weapon.
Yep.
Oh my God. Why is that hardwired into us?
It's instinctive, right? It's
probably, it's probably because we're primates,
right.
Primal is the right word, we're God help the universe. We're the evolved primates, and you watch The Monkey House and it looks like, LA on a busy Friday evening.
Yeah, that's
that's what the universe has to deal with us. I think that we're the troublemakers. We're kind of the guys with ADD, but yet we're intelligent and we have art and express. And I think that we're quite the conundrum to our visitors. I don't think that they quite know what to do with us. I don't think they want to destroy us because we have goodness in us.
Oh, well, they would, if they wanted to destroy us, it'd have been a long time ago.
Yeah. Just the right germ.
The minute they observed Nazi Germany executing millions of people, they would have been like, look, there's no hope for this race. We got to wipe them out. But at the end of the day, and this is harsh to say, but like National Geographics, when you see like the orangutans killing the monkeys, we can't get involved. That's nature. We can observe it. You know, our job is to observe it and study it as science, right? We're not allowed to get involved. It's the natural way of things. So to them, they're a higher state of being. To them, they're like, well, whatever these idiots are doing, we can't alter it. We can, however, maybe prevent a nuclear fallout, because then our project's gone. Our entertainment, planet Earth is over. You know, our DNA study. Right. So their motivation.
I meet some interesting people in ufology, and I've met certain people that are kind of taken seriously that say they're not from here. And you know, one of my favorite one of those told me that she came here as an adventurer because Earth was such an interesting place.
It is.
I mean, the colors, the sights, the sounds, the music, the drama, it's the most interesting place in the universe. And so it's like, you know, what did you do for your summer vacation? I went to Earth, you know. And there may be, you know, and of course, I'm sure that the science element is in there. And also, you know, other than the DNA thieves and carpetbaggers, I think the majority of our visitors are just intrigued and like we would be, if we found another.
Well, consider this, Earl. Consider this. To let's say you're exploring the universe and you're doing this, and I gotta say, even if you're going through portals or you're traveling at a light of speed, to get to Earth from anywhere in the universe, whether it be portals or light of speed or however it is, it's not fast. It takes probably generations, right? Yeah. Now, to do this, to accomplish this, you can't be like humans. You have to be a species and behave like a species. You can't have individuality. You can't have ideologies or religion. You have to be in one consistent mind frame to achieve this. Or an example would be like, and I say this a lot, when Elon wants to go to Mars and terraform, the application to go to Mars to help, I promise when the box check off, you're not going to see the box asking what your race is. You're not going to see the box asking what your religion or your politics are. That's not going to be there. Not even your sex. That won't even matter. All that matters, what can you contribute to the terraforming of Mars? Period. Mm. That's it. None of that other shit matters. It's useless. You know,
what can humanity bring to the table for the greater universe? That's always a question on my mind, you know. And I think that we're artists that you know, I don't know that there's another Beatles in the universe, for instance, or a Beethoven or a Stravinsky. I don't know that there's another Hemingway or Shakespeare or, you know, Dostoevsky or Kafka out there. I mean, we express, I think that, you know, just, you know, from what I've heard through the grapevine and from interesting people I've met along the way, I've heard that humanity is just very interesting and we're dramatic. And I think that we might have the same reaction now if we met another intelligent race that was less technologically advanced than we were.
Right.
We would probably, you know, we'd be sending scientists out there. There would probably be some missionaries going over there. But I think they would have the prime directive. And I think that perhaps those that are visiting us have something similar, that they're allowed to do so much, but that there's overarching values in the end that they have to stick to.
Right.
Now, that doesn't say they all stick to those. You know, you talk to Terry Lovelace and you hear a horror story. I mean, what happened to him was horrible. And it sounds like murderers and miscreants that got a hold of him. And I imagine that the universe has those from other planets.
Oh, of course, it has to. That's
other than here. You know?
There is yin and yang everywhere. It's impossible to have. You can't imagine anywhere in existence where it's just good, you know, beings. It makes no sense. You have to have counterbalance, or else, you know, it wouldn't make any sense. You know, that being said, like even earlier, like what I was saying, like, well, you got to be one, you know, collective consciousness of a species. You know, the ideologies don't matter. But imagine that very group, they finally get to Earth and they look here like, holy shit, what are these people? They're throwing bombs at each other and fight. Or when they first got here, it's sword battles, right? And fights over who knows what. I mean, the point is, we're beyond interesting. Not to mention, like, well, what's the study like? What, can we breathe their air? How long would the hybrid program take? Let's see how they evolve over the course of time. Because, you know, if you're traveling the vastness of the universe, you have to be sustainable in whatever it is you did that in, period. You know? Yeah. So they're not looking for resources, people, I promise. You know? The other side of that coin is, what if we're a comparison? I mean, keep this in mind. Just our galaxy alone, to send a radio wave across just the Milky Way, 100,000 years, right? That's just the Milky Way. And now we're seeing through Hubble and coming soon James Webb, galaxies, plural, and then this large universe. And we're speculating that the universe is even older than we thought, which, science, whatever we knew yesterday, horseshit tomorrow. Point is,
I bet they'll change the steady state theory as the
they're going to have to
idea again. Eventually, Dr. Frederick Hoyle will have his day again.
Yeah, I mean, we're starting to figure out that there's bubbles of universes, plural, in a greater void of something. Now I
believe that.
Yeah, so
I'm a fan of fractal software. The good old Mandelbrot fractals, Julia set. Yeah, and it's just mathematics, but it's just really it's addition and multiplication done ad infinitum. But you get these beautiful multi-tangented iterations of it starts out with this object that you see, and then it just keeps on flowing, and it's a universe unto itself, and it keeps repeating. It's repetitive. It has tributaries and main rivers to it. And you'll travel along in a fractal zoom, and you'll see all these different variations on the original theme until you can barely recognize it. And then it will bring you back to the original, Mandelbrot figure, which some say looks like a big beetle or a sitting Buddha. But it's wonderful. If you can ever look at a Mandelbrot fractal stream, you can just Google it, or they have them on YouTube and stuff.
Right.
It's just so wonderful. But Arthur C. Clarke, I was talking about 2001. I guess I got it on my brain. But he said that he thought that the Mandelbrot set was God's thumbprint, that perhaps our universe was designed on the model of that.
Glad you said that.
It makes sense.
I'm glad you said that, because if you look, and I've noticed this, maybe I'm a pattern person. I see patterns in things. And if you look at the universe, the cosmic web, why do we call it the cosmic web? Well, it resembles very closely to a web. And when you break things down in a molecular state, like in oils, what do you see? You see a very similar construct. In fact, this is repeated from scale small to, we can't even perceive it, right up until so large it's hard for us to comprehend it. It's the similar construct. And why people are like, well, why do you depict your aliens as being bipedal? And well, listen, the laws of nature expands through the universe. If it ain't broken, why fix it?
And I'm sure that there's octopoids and I mean, I remember one alien that was in a science fiction novel that looked sort of like a question mark. It rolled on a wheel, but it evolved that way. And then the top would just sort of like a living gyroscope would always stay upright. So you'd have like, a long line of these not question marks. I guess if they had a bad back, they would look like a rolling question mark, but exclamation points. I mean, I think that the universe is probably rich in variety of
absolutely
races, but the bipedal form is a good form to take.
Right.
If you're going to Earth.
Because when you're bipedal and you have hands, and so the point I make there is these are people that are going to use instruments and tools right away. So now consider a planet where the dolphin was there. It's an all-water planet, very intelligent species, all water. But they can't escape their environment. They no matter what they build, it's going to be built into the water. And then once it gets into vast space, it's not going to behave nearly the same. And because they're in all water environment, they may not need digits. They might have a very great brain. But imagine a dolphin being so sophisticated, so intelligent, like a human. Like, we'll put a human brain in a dolphin. They can't very well build things because one thing that they can't use are their digits, their limbs.
They would need a Waldo. They would need an a prothesis,
Right. And even then,
Larry
that has
Niven
to be built.
is a great science fiction writer. Also, David Brin kind of went there in some of his novels, and other people, scientists have been, talking about this, that you might be able to equip a dolphin with opposable thumbs and digits. And maybe they would become technological. And
they could acclimate and evolve. Right. Yeah.
And maybe that's what our visitors are kind of doing with us. They see the potential. So far, all the races that we seem to come in contact with, they don't speak with their mouths. They speak mind to mind.
Right. And that could, and bear in mind too, and I see this a lot of people think, well, what are they, like psychic? Well, you don't know. Like, we're just now developing Neuralink. That's going to be a real thing in 5 to 10 years. We're just, and eventually, Earl, when we get to the point where we're communicating with no words, things like race and religion aren't going to matter because we're going to see the true meaning of humanity. We're going to see each other's thoughts, and we're going to be able to see past the superficial.
It'll be wonderful for quadriplegics.
Right.
You know, I mean, that was my job for, you know, almost 40 years of my life, was taking care of people that were paralyzed, and many of them were nonverbal, and you'd have to use a blinking, you know, they would have to blink as you would point to letters on a board.
Right.
And, you know, and that's how, and then the computer, you know, they got sophisticated enough to where, you know, I had a patient that would just tell me what he needed with his computer. He couldn't speak, but he could use his left foot enough to where he could type stuff out on a computer.
Yeah, they can even recognize brainwaves.
Now it's mind to computer that they're working on.
Yeah.
It's going to be an interface. It's coming. And that's, you know, I mean, that is the singularity that we are heading towards. Ray Kurzweil's book, The Singularity. I highly recommend it because we're on the cusp of it. Humanity is evolving. We are changing.
Yeah. And unfortunately,
it's going to happen in our lifetimes.
Here's the scary part, though. Our technology is evolving faster than we are. We're, you know, yes. I say this a lot. I don't mean to beat the dead horse, but we're still racist, and I don't even understand how that's possible. I don't even get how that's possible after all this time.
It's going to have to change.
It's insane
for us to grow. Now, maybe the, you know, this evolution that's going to happen in us. Once you can read everybody's mind, you'll see that everybody thinks the same. Right. Everybody has good and bad thoughts. And right. It'll be quite the education when we get there.
Definitely be a culture shock. I'll say that much. You know?
If we survive it, we'll be a better, you know, crew for it.
Well, that being said, too, like I was saying earlier, what if we're under comparison? What if, and now the reason I say the vastness of space and multiple universes, this is a sophisticated being that's observing us. What if there's many Earths and we're just like if you, so imagine if you go to a lab, you have several tanks of rats and each rat is being developed in their own way. And you monitor them separate. You keep them separate so they don't even see each other, right? And we do this, by the way.
Well, that's a multiverse theory.
Right.
And I kind of am a proponent of that, although we can't prove it's true yet. So it's a theory I like a lot.
I think MIT's going to surprise a lot of people in the next decade.
I think so, too.
I think they're really going to. But the point I make is, so let's say there's, and we do know there's exoplanets now. We've found tremendous amounts of them. But we're limited to see what they look like. A lot of it's guesstimation based upon readings we get surrounding its star and the gases, etc. The point I make is these sophisticated beings can see. They already have ships that are at those planets, and they're communicating, saying, well, how's your study going? How's your study going? What's your version of Earth like? And when you hear the word version, it speaks to there's another Earth somewhere or many Earths, and they're watching all of the evolution of all these different planets, and we're part of one large study. We're unaware of it.
I am absolutely positive that this is not the first time that this has happened, where people are seeing UFOs, they're being taken or visited, they're being changed. Some people have horror stories. Some people, it's just this beatific thing. But you know, they're using whatever ways and means that they have to change us as a species. Some of this is through love, some is through fear. It's the stick and the carrot.
Right.
And it seems like a process. It doesn't seem like something that they're doing on the fly. It seems like something that there's some deep knowledge behind what they're doing. And I am absolutely positive that it's not the first time that it's happened here on Earth, that it's happened in other worlds with other societies, maybe creatures that look like us, maybe exactly like us, maybe our doppelgangers, you know, in alternate iterations of this Earth. But, you know, the one thing that I am sure of, that is hypothesis, but the one thing that I'm pretty darn sure of is that this is nothing new, that these guys have done this before and they know what they're doing.
Yeah. I mean, again, you don't hear people say, oh, man, they took John, he came back, he's crippled. These aren't experiments gone wrong. They clearly know what they're doing. You know, no one's ever come back maimed or in fact,
they screw up sometimes. Well, I mean, they drop people when they're, you know, trying to take them through the ceiling and things like that.
Sure.
So they're not gods.
Well, yeah, they're not perfect, but for the most part,
small G gods,
yeah,
demigods maybe at this point.
Yeah, no one's come back drooling and unable to communicate. You know, and in fact, like The case with Travis, where he ran to it and he got injured. They had to, oh, damn it, he ran into us. Now we got to fix this guy. You know what I mean? So
that's morals there.
Yeah.
Morals in action and work.
Right.
That's amazing to me. And I know Travis, and I believe him, and he was changed by that. And at first it was all fear. The man was hiding under the table and antisocial and afraid. And now he's sort of, he's in public and
he's had time for hindsight to recognize that him and I, just one thing in common, run to the thing. I got to see this. I don't even care what it is. Run right up to and look at it, right?
It's a bad idea. You don't want to run into Area 51 and don't run towards a UFO.
Right.
If you're close enough to a UFO and you still have your wits about you, God, take a video and take some photos. So I've got like the coordinates of where you are. And don't turn your video camera off.
Exactly right. So what ended up happening to him is he did exactly what I do. You ran to it, you see it, and then you got injured. And they're like we would do in National Geographics. We can't get involved, but if we hit a cheetah with a car, we got to fix it. We're obligated.
Yeah.
So all right, so some of the horror stories I've gotten from people that have had encounters. One, and I won't say his name because it's an off podcast thing, and I'll respect his privacy. He's a state trooper though. And he wasn't, not that they did something horrible to him, but it put everything he had as a belief system in check, right? It altered everything he thought he knew to be as fact, right? And this is a Mormon, he was Mormon, I believe he said. And was it Mormon or something of that, where it's a really strong organized religion, and you're made to believe, this is it, God made here, blah, blah, blah. And it rocked him. He was rocked, and he went through depression. He lost his job. He took 2 years off, got therapy. He's finally working again.
Good for him.
And but he said it took me years, and I was lying to people about what happened to me because I was gone for some period of time, but I didn't want to tell anyone what happened because in his mind, what happened. It was a sin. The fact that he even remembered is that the devil did something in the prayers, but he finally came to terms with what it was, and. It's tough because he's from a family of organized, they're religious. And so he's in this awkward position where he knows something is other than here, but the best way he can rationalize it, it's the enemy. The word he uses, enemy. And I hear that a lot in Christians. Well,
anything that is new and that scares us that we're going to think of as an enemy, it's fight and flight. That's our first response. It's built into us. We're hardwired like that, and of course, John Mack called that the reaction that we have ontological shock. And I understand that personally. When you have ET contact, it pulls the rug out from under you as far as your, presumed idea of reality goes. It throws it out the window,
Yeah.
And you have to reevaluate everything, and it becomes personal. It's when the phenomenon becomes personal. I know people that still have PTSD because of their encounters. It seems to a lot of military or police, people that were in authority themselves,
yes,
that were supposed to be keeping the peace. It's even more vulnerable for them when they're paralyzed and things are done to them. They're taken somewhere it's out of their control. And boy, that can, I have one case where this guy fought in Vietnam. He did not have PTSD from that, he said, but he sure as hell had PTSD from being taken out through the roof of his barracks and, being confronted with, these tall gray entities that, they were messing with him psychologically. I don't know if these were just bad guys or they were trying to change his militant attitude that had been, he's a Marine, right? So, but they more or less told him they were going to, we have your body now and we're going to take your soul. Now they didn't take his soul. I don't think they could take his soul. But they told him that, and they scared him purposefully. And this guy still had nightmares and PTSD and everything, and a great guy, this was somebody who, I'm proud that he served our country in such a manner. I spoke with his whole family. He'd been talking about this all of his life, but he kept it to himself, within the confines of his own family. And I think when he was able to speak with somebody who understood more about this phenomenon, that it was comforting to him. And I think that a lot of stuff that we do, especially in MUFON's experience or resource team, is we're there to comfort, listen, and to give them the resources that they need. There's support groups out there for experiencers. There are vetted hypnotherapists out there that can do regression for people if they really, really want to do that. And I will say, I go back and forth in my feelings about hypnotic regression. I think sometimes it's done for a reason. I wouldn't want to remember my hip surgery, for instance.
Right.
There's a reason why that was, I was made to forget that. If I remembered it, it would look like a horror show or like somebody was doing something malevolent to me.
Well, regardless, even when you injure yourself and you remember it and you scream, man, like I injure my leg pretty significantly. And every time I even think of that, I scream a little bit. It's a pretty significant injury. So you don't want to remember that. And your brain suppresses it for you mostly, right? Like we don't want to think of that. But I'm glad you said what you said earlier, because here's what I found. And I've never heard this on TV. I don't hear it on documentaries. It seems to be most of the people that go through hypnotic regression or recall the encounter or happened, or if they're having negative experience, period, all have one thing in common. They're alpha-minded people. They're people that are not used to not being in positions of power. They're people, they have a lot of pushback. I find, and like, I saw one thing on a documentary, and they were doing hypnotic regression. The guy was screaming bloody murder. And then I found out he was like a military colonel. I was like, well, that makes sense. This he's not used to being vulnerable. He doesn't understand what it's like to be, So for him to have such a strange occurrence and all the power he knows to be taken from him, of course he's going to.
Our visitors are more aggressive towards the military. I've noticed this. I mean, if you think about the Tic Tac incident, it was a show of power.
Oh, yeah. No doubt.
We sent out a squadron of planes out there, and they kind of laughed, and they shot off to their cap point, 90 miles away, was it? The same latitude, longitude, and the same elevation. I mean, it was 3 sets of coordinates. It included elevation, and that was their cap point, reconnaissance point that they were going to go back to. Well, that's where the Tic Tac was waiting for them.
Yeah, and if you listen,
it was definitely telling them something and telling us something.
And if you listen to David Fravor,
just happened to the military, though, is what I noticed.
Yeah, if you listen to David Fravor, I'm glad you said that, because the way he made it sound, like when he engaged with it, like, I'm engaged with it. He says it noticed me. And you're a fighter pilot. You realize when something's pattern is altered because of your presence. And just as you said, I thought the same thing. Like, these things are showing you, like, well, what are you going to do about it? Nothing, Yeah. So, yeah, I'm glad you said that. Before podcast, you're telling me about a case that was given new life.
Oh, I'm working on a case right now that I just love. I originally, this is a private case. The main witness actually went to the MUFON office back like 7 years ago. And I think that the case was maybe just too dark or something. And for some reason, our former executive director didn't really pursue it. And but what's interesting is that the main witness, his wife was an old former friend of mine from high school who I'd ridden music with and stuff. And a no nonsense person, just one of the, she was one of the smart girls that, I never dated her. I was just her friend, but my keyboard player for my band did date her. And that was like the date where you'd want to wear nice clothes and maybe put on a little aftershave or something. Right. Anyway, but, I'll tell you that what happened with this case was this was back in 1975. It's an old case. The father was an Air Force mucky muck. He actually had worked with Project Blue Book in White Sands. The two brothers had a weird story, a bit like the one that my mom told me about being taken into an underground base But this was a giant computer nexus that they were taken to. It must have been like 1963, 1962 at latest. And but anyway, so in 1975, the brothers and I think that a couple friends were out front playing guitars, and they see that this fireball that was blue, and it was about the size of a basketball, I guess, and it came barreling out of the sky, but silently, and it was very bright, like neon blue. And it hit the field across from their house, and there were tendrils, almost like that you would see from a Tesla coil, that were just rolling along the ground. And they're watching this thing, and it's like, meteor, aliens, what is that? You know? So, but they kind of, you know, I guess they were about 20 years old or something at the time, and they thought it was very strange. They talked about it a lot, but they thought that was going to be the end of it. But the following nights, there were these screaming sounds coming from the field, and the screaming started going into the field behind their backyard as well. And the weird thing about the scream, it would be sort of a cross between animalistic and human. There would be a scream and then a beep. Scream. What screams and beeps? Adam, I don't know.
I don't know. Like screaming and beeping. You know, an ex-wife?
Screaming and beeping. So they called the police out. And I don't know that there's going to still be a police report for this. It's 1975, but I'm going to look into it. But they came out with a spotlight, and they were looking in the field. The screaming and the beeping stopped, of course, as soon as the police got there. And the police left the scene, and they said, we don't see anything out there. As soon as they left, the screaming starts, except it's even louder. These guys had trained German Shepherd watchdogs, and they had to drag them from the doghouse into the garage because they were just whimpering and afraid. You know, they're first standing on edge. And the screaming and beeping just got louder and louder. The father, who was the old Air Force guy, took the two sons, and they went up to the top of their driveway. The house was on the bottom of an incline. So if you got to the driveway, you could see the hillside behind the house. So they went up there to see if they could see it, because it was just really close. They could hear the screaming and the beeping. So when they were standing out there were, I think it was 3 blue fireballs that were hovering over the house. Now, these were like 3 feet across. They were huge. They had a surface to them, but yet they were bright, like just the brightest blue, like a neon blue. And they just hung over the house for a little while, and then suddenly they accelerated and crashed into the hill behind their house. So now it's like these guys are surrounded. There was the first fireball crash in front of their house. Now there's 2 fireball crashes in, I guess, 2 or 3. I forget. I have to look at the notes here, but behind their house. So they all went up to the second story parents' bedroom, and they had a window that looked out in the area that was up on the second story. So the whole family is crowded around this window trying to see what's out there. You know, scream, beep, beep. Well, this light starts coming up the stairwell. The younger brother saw the light first through the mirror in the bathroom, and I guess that he turned around, and this light came up like a physical thing and filled the bedroom up. Now, my friend from high school, the guy's wife at the time, the main witness, she felt like she was pregnant, by the way. She was 6 months pregnant. A no-nonsense woman, a nurse and a professional. But she started screaming and screaming. She said, "I am being probed." This is where I was talking about. Some people feel like they've been probed, except it was like their whole body, and it was something not physical, but almost electronic or ghostly or something.
Right.
But she was screaming and screaming. And that's really the last thing that most of them remember. It was the family of 4 of them. And the next thing they know, it's 4.5 hours later. None of them had any memory of what happened in that 4.5 hours. When I first got this case, I was really excited about it, and the main witness died. The eldest brother passed away. The other two witnesses were not wanting to talk. It upset my friend, from high school too much to talk about it. It felt personal to her,
Right.
She was pregnant, for God's sakes, when this happened. And I guess that the younger brother, it was just, he was afraid it would harm, his work and things like that. And they just didn't want to go there. So it was case closed. But through a series of really interesting synchronicities, the case is opened again. By no effort of my own, the brother, I just randomly saw somebody talking about this case that happened in my old hometown. And there it was. It was just a random post in a social media group. And I got a hold of the guy, and it turns out that it's the main witness's brother. And now the widow, my friend from high school, is willing to go and actually explore what happened and talk about it. And that's a huge thing, because I've been able to speak with there's one friend of the family that I still need to talk with, that was on the front porch when the original incident happened. And I the two parents were deceased when the eldest brother came to me. But I have the potential of talking to 4 of the 6 witnesses of this thing. And I think it's going to be a major case.
Yeah, I think when you dig into that, you definitely got to come back on and give me the results of that.
I'd love to.
That has me.
I think you'll be hearing about this one. I have a really, I don't know, sometimes I just get a little feeling about certain cases. This one I got a feeling about.
It's going to break out.
I've had a feeling about it for years. I've thought about this case for years. It was just a big, 50-foot question mark for me for a long time.
Yeah, it's got me on the edge of my seat thinking like, wow, what the hell went on there? It's a 4-hour period. That's the world. An enormous amount of things could take place in 4 hours.
Yes.
And
there were implants and things as well that were discovered.
As there should be. People, I say this to people a lot. I'm going to be honest. They're like, abduction sounds crazy. They don't put implants. People just listen. We abduct animals all the time and put implants in animals. Yeah. And if you wanted to, they're going to do DNA testing on these people. That sounds crazy. We do it all the time. We put ears on mice.
Yes, we do.
We're harvesting. We're harvesting organs from pigs that we're putting into them. This is real. Yeah. We do this. We've cloned sheep. So now that's our
We did
ability.
That in the 1980s,
right?
85 or something.
Yeah, that's our ability. Imagine something with thousands of years on us. Forget it. Yeah. Forget it. The sky's the limit what they could do.
Well, think about, I think that they must be masters of bioengineering. And if I were going to go to a planet and I couldn't necessarily breathe the atmosphere, or maybe I wasn't a bipedal creature with arms,
right.
I would just create an avatar body from the DNA from that planet. And if you had some means of peopling that temporarily or from a, remote spot, perhaps even, that might be some of what we see as far as some of the entities.
I agree. I completely agree with that. Like I was saying earlier, if we found a planet, me and Earl are on a ship, like, wow, that planet's dope. It's got trees and animals and there's beings down there. They seem smart, although they're killing each other with weapons. A group of them are believing in something that there's no way they saw this. We would have to figure out, well, how do we integrate there? We can't breathe their air. And how long would that take? And it's not just a question of how long it would take me, but my species, because my lifestyle, my lifetime, it might not work. So we have to have notes, and we have to continue to do the study on these beings that we found down here in order for us to integrate. Outside of that, people have this idea like, well, they're so smart, they could have did it long ago. No, they couldn't. What are you talking about? That's a very sophisticated thing to do. It's not a one lifetime thing. I promise.
How do you change primates? How do you change fight and flight reactions? It's the first thing we do. Everything that we've evolved, even the way that we see things, is to, pattern recognition. So you can
Right.
recognize a face. That's why you see faces in the clouds and
Right.
stuff,
Right.
because we're hardwired to see threats. And we pay the Pentagon to do that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with how the Pentagon is approaching the phenomenon. I don't think it's the right way the best way to approach the phenomena as threat assessment. And that's what they see. It's threat assessment and how can we weaponize this, right? That's what we pay them to do. But this is why you need nonprofit groups again, like MUFON,
Right.
which is the, greatest and oldest and best,
I
a little prejudice,
I stand behind you on that, man. I listen, the diversity of MUFON. I mean, there's anywhere from the Steves who are very militant. Like, I take this to court. You have like Margie Kay, who's like, she goes way into different ideas. Like, she's willing to go out there and explore different ideas and avenues. You have people like you, like an ambassador of humanity. The diversity is needed. There should be no protocol for you. Well, you got to dress this way. You got to behave this way. That's horseshit. You can't do that,
It's a big tent and there's room for all of you guys.
Right. Because if you don't have different perspectives, you're not going to have science, right? Because that's
right.
It's not very scientific for having everyone to have the same opinion. That's not science. That's a formed opinion that everyone agrees upon. It's not correct. Doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So for you, I'll ask you this before we close out. Because I've been asked this, and once I was asked, I became curious of it. You're an experiencer, and for other experiencers, fully recognizing that all experiencers have different experiences. Is there, in yours you didn't communicate, but in some others they do communicate, depending on what they need you for.
I had teachable moments after the initial experience. In fact, looking at the initial experience, I see teachable moments in there. I mean, they were definitely trying to show me stuff about time, about matter, about the universe, about my perceptions as opposed to the reality of things. And, I threw a lot of bathwater out after my experience. It changed me. In the moment, it was horrifying. I mean, I was scared to death. I'm glad that I went to the bathroom before I went to bed that night, or I, probably would have. Anyway, it won't go.
Well, I mean, here's the thing too. That's why people they don't really
It was horrifying.
Yeah, the word paranormal.
Later on, it became something magical when other synchronicities and things started amping up, and I noticed that my empathy was growing for others. That I had more what I guess I would call telepathic, for lack of a better term, flashes and things like that. It seemed to change me in some core manner. And I think it made me a better person than I was back 7 years ago. Not that I was a bad person then, but I think I'm probably a deeper and more compassionate person than I was back then. And that's the one thing that I notice.
Right.
One thing people forget is that there's this thing called the Valet Davis effect, where when people have contact with ETs, that there seems like there's this cosmic contagion where people, after having a close encounter, or even sometimes with a craft, if the Oz effect is felt, and it's actually sort of changed them. It's sort of, they've had telepathic communication of some kind. But humans start taking on alien attributes. We become more telepathic, empathic. The mind-to-mind thing starts happening. Synchronicities starts happening. People are left with gifts, and that's a beautiful positive. And I think that there is evolution in action. And you don't hear about it much, but from case to case, whether horrifying or benevolent, whether the person feels like they met the Buddha on the mountaintop or, Dracula in his castle after they've had their experience, they still all seem to manifest the same things. And that is heightened awareness, synchronicities, telepathy, healing sometimes. And compassion and empathy. Those are all amplified in experiencers.
It's telling because to evolve biologically, I think you'd have to evolve psychologically first, right? for me, especially like when I first started doing a podcast, if you asked me what happened after death, I was like, nah, it's we're a computer. The lights turn off. It's over. My thought process has evolved by what I learned. Right. I'm never steadfast in anything. And I don't say that to be like, well, he just can't make his mind up. Well, no, I'm always going to learn something new. And if it disproves something I previously knew, then so be it. I'm going to learn new and I'm going to expand. I'm not going to sit complacent where I am. It's a crazy way to think. With the experiencers.
I think that the day of the abductee victim is coming to an end. I'm hearing more and more and more people who, after having an experience, even if it was a scary one, that are recognizing new gifts and new thoughts and new attitudes and behaviors within themselves. So, however the means, I think that this contagion is being passed on to us that's going to change us and perhaps make us something more than warlords in space. And that's what we would be now if they let us out there, into the greater cosmos. We would have Star Wars, right? And Star Wars is a human thing. I don't think that's what they want. And I think that we aren't the first persons to do a war in space. And of course, we have our, military satellites. We're already doing this stuff. But I don't think they want to see that on a grand scale. And that's what's going on,
Yeah.
I think that, and that whatever this is, when we meet entities or have a close encounter with a UFO, it changes a person.
Yeah, I think the negative encounters will more than decrease. I'll tell you why. Mainstream media is bringing more ufology to light, especially with our government, and so the fear of it is starting to, we're mitigating that. And then also, what the thing when people say paranormal, they don't realize that it just means parallel to your normal, right? Like if you go live in China, the way they do things in China, it's just parallel to your normal. It's different. And like us, your first experience was scary. And most people, especially the alpha-minded people, they don't want that experience because it's outside of their control. The point is, like a new cat, when you have a cat, when you come to someone's home and you have a cat, it's terrified of you. It doesn't come out. You put your hand, even though you love and care about it, it's going to run like hell. It's like, oh my God, it's going to kill me. It takes time to build that trust, to understand that this entity's here. It feeds me, it cleans up behind me, and it's not harming me. I'm not afraid of it anymore. It's the same kind of thing, just different. But the difference between us and a cat is we're very much more self-aware, and we contemplate different kind of scenarios for negative reaction. Right? A cat doesn't think like, is he going to probe me? Cat doesn't care about that. It's not even on their mind.
Probers.
Yeah,
that's a new thing, I guess.
Right? Yeah. So cats don't worry about the same things we do. Right? It's a different primal instinct.
God, don't give anybody ideas out there. Lord have mercy.
But yeah, at the end of the day, it's us just getting used to it. And like for me, so anyway, the initial part of this whole question was, is there room to negotiate with them? Like example, if
I think so.
Yeah, because
I think there's room to negotiate. I think that, that's just a personal opinion, but I meet some interesting people in this field, and the people that I've met seem to feel that there's an overarching, that they're not just here to do air shows,
right?
And it's much deeper than that, and that there is some criteria that they're trying to, they've got a mission here, and it's up to us to figure out, well, what is that mission? Well, I don't think they're here to eat us. I don't think they're here to defeat us. They could have done that with, anything.
Well, they certainly wouldn't wait for us to have the power of the sun inside of a capsule that we could launch across the planet, right? They would have done it long ago.
Well, I think that, there's definitely interest and probably love for us, and also some fear and worry, and I mean, that's how I would feel. I mean, it's the monkey cage, the intelligent monkey cage.
For me, Earl, if let's say I woke up, and I was conscious of I had an encounter. I mean, I personally never experienced anything, but if it does, and if they're listening, if they came to my house. And I asked, well, whoa, what do you guys want with me? And they're like, well, we need DNA. I'm like, well, that's fine. Can we schedule this? And two, you're intelligent. You guys have all these abilities. What do I get out of this? I mean, can you make me smarter, taller? I mean, I want to be really good at painting. I want to negotiate.
Yeah.
And then schedule on Thursdays, so it's not conflicting with my other things.
Well, I think just putting that out there, and you know, if we're being observed, then we're being observed. I mean, you know, I imagine that podcasts on the subject and stuff are not, you know, alien to the aliens.
No, not at all. They're probably
so even talking about this, I mean, we're putting that out there, and maybe they're listening as well. I hope so.
Yeah, like they're right now. They're like, "Do you hear what that guy just said?" Because we're taking that guy. He just signed up.
I don't know. Maybe kind of do a little XX thing on that and just say, well, I want to meet like Valiant Thor or a cute tall white with blonde hair, you know, female.
Yeah, the Nordics.
Right? Otherwise, you got the grab bag, and it might be the little 4-foot tall gray guys that grab you as well. So,
well, I don't care if it's them, as long as they get me to the guy that makes the decisions. Like, can we escalate this to the management? Or
yeah, I'd like that. I would like to meet those guys.
But yeah,
I might have to go to low Earth orbit to meet them. I don't know that, you know, the Mantis guys oftentimes are seen as the pilots, the doctors, the ones in charge. And
yeah,
you don't really see them on Earth. They are the wrong body shape for it. Gravity would probably
crush them,
kill them like it would be like a whale, a beached whale. These things are 10 foot tall. So yeah, I'd like to go to a ship and meet a Mantis if they were friendly and didn't probe me. Right.
At some point, we're going to get, hopefully, before, you know, in my lifetime, we'll get to the point where I could get one on a podcast. We're accepting it's out in the open. You know, it might
happen someday.
I think it'd be great. I'd do it in a heartbeat.
Not out of the realm of possibilities. It's a strange phenomena.
I mean, they got a pretty good track record as far as flight. I mean, I'm not good at flying, but their track record's good enough. I'd go. You know,
yeah. Well, just not the Roswell.
Well, yeah, not in the 40s. I'm like, obviously,
look out for the deep radar. You know.
Oh man. Anyway, Earl, it's been a pleasure. I always enjoy having you on. I'm sure we're going to do it again.
Adam.
And for anyone listening, I'm going to talk to Earl in post. So good night, good day, good evening, or whatever's for you. Take care.
All right.